The Holy Hole. Once upon a time there was a hole, a deep, dark and ever so mysterious hole. Now the curious thing about a hole is that when you see one, you're mesmerized into looking inside. Your eyes are inexplicably drawn to the mystery of what is within, toward the innermost recesses, down inside, searching, seeking as the unknown enfolds before your eyes. Like all holes, this hole felt that something was missing from his life. Deep down in the recesses of his heart, the hole thought he was made of nothing, then he must be nothing. Being a hole, of course, he spent much of his time in the dark. Sometimes that darkness would be increased by the shadows of his surroundings, and it was in those long times of lasting darkness that the hole would find himself intensely pondering his existence and fantasizing about a life if he wasn't a hole. Looking up at the heavens, sometimes the hole would imagine he was the mountains. Oh, to be a mountain, pictured the hole. I could see everything up high, dance with the clouds and touch the sky. Oh, to be a river, visualized the hole. I could just go with the flow and always know that I was on a course that always leads to the great sea. See everywhere and everything. Oh, to be the wind, imagined the hole. To drift anywhere and everywhere without a care in the world, limitless in my capabilities and invisible to all. The hole clung to the hope of one day seeing what it is like above the surface. Now, being a hole is not all dark and gloomy. The hole had lots of friends, including the sun and the moon. Every day the sun would glide past and say, "Hello." And every month or so the moon would meander past and say, "Hello." One special day the world went totally quiet and the sun and the moon got married and had an eclipse. The hole knew that they were united when he saw the great golden ring they made together as a symbol of their love. Even though the hole felt joy and happiness for the sun and the moon, the hole despaired, for deep inside his hollow void, he felt even lonelier than before. After all, he was always stuck in one place. Luckily, the hole's best friend was a worm. He used to visit him all the time and poke her head in. The worm used to travel everywhere and would tell the excited hole all about her adventures. The worm had many other friends, and oftentimes they would visit, making a few well-used tunnels and connections to the hole. Often when it rained, the tunnels would let in water, and so the hole would get filled up a little bit and feel a little better. He would never get filled up completely though, so he'd get close to the surface that he so craved, but never quite there. He never quite made it through to the surface. It was exhaustively discouraging for the hole and made him more and more frustrated. This unfulfillment would eventually lead to a chasm of resentment. As the years went by, the hole got angry and bitter at his life. He began to resent the freedom of the sun and the moon, the worms, and seemingly everyone and everything else around him. As his resentment grew, so the surfaces of the hole hardened, got thicker and thicker, making it increasingly difficult for the hole to connect with the outside world, whilst at the same time it was getting increasingly challenging for the outside world to connect with the hole. To make matters worse, as the hole looked up, all he could see was the ominous dark clouds of a huge storm coming, unsettlingly reflecting the raging tempest that was brewing inside of himself. Alas, even the worms couldn't get through the substantial walls that the hole had constructed around himself. What a shame, thought the worms. If only the Hole could just get a glimpse of life outside of his own space. The worms could see that the Hole was painfully unhappy. How can we help him, they deliberated. They looked at the skies and could see the huge storm was imminent. This could be our only chance, they realized, to release their dear friend from his self-imposed confinement. So they all congregated together and scraped and burrowed and tunneled a small opening through the almost impenetrable walls. And just in time as the dark swollen clouds began to drizzle their heavy burden. How happy the Hole was to see his worm friends again, and he gave them a weak smile as some rainwater began to seep through, quenching some of his thirst. The worms, realizing how fragile the Hole had become, frantically made more and more connections, more and more tunnels, so that more and more water could fill the emptiness of the Hole. And as the storm raged on, higher and higher the water would rise, closer and closer to the surface. Paradoxically, the hardened walls of the Hole was keeping all the water in. The Hole was getting closer and closer to the surface than he had ever been. As the massive storm continued to thunder down a torrent of rain, he allowed the possible prospect of freedom to consume him. But still the Hole couldn't quite reach the outside and see what was beyond. I am so close, thought the Hole. I've never been this close. All my friends are helping me, but it's not enough. And with that, the rain suddenly stopped, causing all of his friends to cry in their disillusionment. This is unbearable, thought the distraught Hole, as the sadness completely engulfed him. He couldn't take it anymore. All hope had left him, and at last he himself finally began to weep, and then uncontrollable sobbing ensued. And with that release of a great stream of tears, at last the Hole began to overflow as he broke through to the surface, and a blissful vision flooded his wholeness. And with that revelation, the Hole realized that at last he was whole. The whole time he was a pupil in the eyes of a blind man. His tears had enabled the blind man to see, and when the Hole had finally filled with water, he realized that his holiness was actually teardrops in the eyes of the blind. And will the sun ever shine in the blind man's eyes when he cries, looking upon this heaven on earth, he thought. I wonder what would happen if we all cry at the same time tonight, wondered the Hole. For one thing, there wouldn't be any more holes anymore, would there? And after the great flood, then all of the blind would see. Is that what it means to be divine? Envisioned the whole Hole, embracing his visionary, new-found role. And with that, the Hole had truly become whole, and joining his friends in the paradise once lost, seeing and believing, he had become a holy Hole.